All right, so we're diving deep into Scarface's Tiny Desk concert today. You actually sent over the transcript, so this one is all you?
Awesome.
I'm excited for this one.
Me too. Yeah, Scarface is a legend.
Definitely. And you know what struck me right away was how he kicks things off with On My Block.
Yeah,
It's such a classic Scarface track, you know?
for sure.
But hearing it in this stripped-down setting at the Tiny Desk, I don't know, it just hits different.
It does, and it's interesting how he, sets the tone immediately
Right away.
with that opening line, "My blood on my block."
Yeah.
It's not just about location,
It's deeper than that.
It's about claiming his space.
Yeah.
The weight of his history.
Totally.
Almost like a challenge, right?
And then he throws in that detail about being high with Mike Dean when they wrote it,
Yeah.
just casually,
It's like off the cuff.
Makes you wonder how much of that rawness, comes from the moment itself.
Totally. And it adds this layer of authenticity to it.
Yeah.
But it also connects to something bigger, I think,
Mhm.
about Scarface's career.
Yeah.
He's always been open about his struggles,
So true.
even when that wasn't as common in hip hop,
Especially back then.
Yeah.
And which is so interesting when you think about Mary Jane,
Yeah.
Here's a song that's explicitly about marijuana,
Right.
but it's also about using it to cope with things.
Absolutely.
It's not just recreational for him.
Right. It's deeper than that.
It's tied to this vulnerability that he's willing to put out there.
Yeah. And that's what I think elevates it, beyond just a weed anthem or something like that.
Right.
You're right. It connects to his openness about, mental health and things like that,
Yeah.
which was almost unheard of in the 90s.
Yeah.
Especially in that genre.
Totally. And it makes me think about, how we talk about those things today.
For sure.
He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
Definitely.
But, before we go too far down that road,
Yeah.
I want to circle back to the music itself.
Now, for a moment,
Sure.
there's this part where he talks about the pocket of the music.
Yes.
How it moves you.
Uh-huh.
What's your take on that as a musician?
I think what he's talking about is that feeling when, everything just clicks.
Yeah.
The groove that pulls you in.
Yeah.
Think of it like this. The pocket is where the rhythm, the melody, and the emotions kind of all align perfectly.
I love that.
And it's what makes a song transcend just, the notes on the page.
Right.
It becomes an experience.
Totally. And I feel like that describes this whole concert, actually.
Yes.
Even without the huge production,
Right, yeah.
It's just so emotionally charged.
Very much so.
And speaking of emotions, Smile just wrecked me, man.
Yeah.
The way he weaves in, the loss of his cousin Jamal,
Right.
Tupac.
Yeah.
I mean, it's heavy stuff.
It is heavy stuff. And he's masterful at blending, the personal and the universal.
Totally.
It's not just grief,
It's more than that.
It's a meditation on mortality.
Yeah. And, that story he tells about recording it in this, freezing cold studio high as a kite.
Oh, yeah.
It just adds this almost spectral quality to the song.
You can practically feel the chill listening to it.
Right.
Okay, I have to ask, what do you make of all these, behind-the-scenes stories he keeps dropping?
Yeah.
It's not your typical Tiny Desk vibe.
It's true. It's like he's inviting us into his creative process.
Yeah.
He's not just presenting polished songs. He's showing us the messy human side of how they came to be.
It's so cool, and it actually reminds me of a point we glossed over.
Okay.
He brings up Mike Dean again when he talks about mind playing tricks on me.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It's like he's acknowledging the collaborative spirit
Yes, very much so.
behind these tracks.
Absolutely. And he even highlights how you can hear Mike Dean's influence on the sound, even with all the other, big names involved
So true.
in that track.
It's amazing. And I mean, we could do a whole deep dive just on their partnership, but I do want to get into some of the heavier material here. I Seen a Man Die.
Yeah.
Classic Scarface. But it's brutal.
It is.
The way he describes the violence, the trauma.
It's not just storytelling.
It's more than that.
It's bearing witness.
Yeah.
The detail, the unflinching way he delivers it.
That's it.
It breaks down the barrier between the performer and the listener.
I felt that.
You're forced to confront the reality of what he's lived through.
Yeah, and it's not just about the violence itself,
Well,
There's this sense of resignation, almost like he's seen the cycle play out too many times.
Absolutely. And that connects back to, I think, that idea of social commentary.
Really?
Touched on it earlier.
Yeah.
He's not just describing events,
Right.
He's forcing us to grapple with the systemic issues that perpetuate this kind of violence.
Yeah, and it's powerful stuff.
It is.
And then he follows it up with mind playing tricks on me.
Right.
It's like he's saying, hey, here's the psychological toll this life takes.
Yes, exactly.
The paranoia, the fear,
Uh,
it's so vivid, almost claustrophobic.
it is, and it's so relevant, even today.
Oh my God, yes.
He's articulating these anxieties that are so often silenced,
Totally.
especially within, communities dealing with poverty and systemic oppression.
Right.
It's a landmark song for its honesty about mental health.
It really is, and I think it's made even more poignant by the context of the Tiny Desk setting.
Yes.
Here he is, this legendary figure,
Yeah.
bearing his soul in a space that feels almost too small for his stories.
It's like the intimacy amplifies the vulnerability.
Yes.
It's not a concert, it's a confession,
Right.
a therapy session we're all invited to.
And then just when you think it's all darkness, he throws in this beautiful moment with his son, Bryce.
Yes.
It's like a breath of fresh air.
It is, and it's a reminder that even amidst all that darkness,
Yeah.
there's family legacy.
Total.
The pride in his voice when he talks about Bryce is palpable.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
And he's clearly talented.
Oh, yeah.
But it's more than just pride. It's about passing the torch.
Yeah, nurturing the next generation.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And it almost feels like a microcosm of, the whole hip-hop tradition,
Right.
the passing down of knowledge and experience from one generation to the next.
Exactly, and it just highlights that cyclical nature of creativity,
Yeah,
how inspiration flows through time,
so true.
shaping and reshaping the art form.
Okay, so we've gone through a good chunk of the set list here,
We have,
and it already feels like we've unearthed a lot.
definitely.
But I'm curious what has stood out to you the most so far.
I think for me, what's really stood out is how he uses the Tiny Desk format
Yeah.
to create this, intimate, almost confessional atmosphere.
Yes.
It's not just a performance,
You're telling that.
it's a conversation,
Yeah.
an invitation to engage with his world on a deeper level.
And that's what makes it so compelling, right?
Absolutely.
It's not just about the music.
It's about the man.
It's about the man behind the music, the stories he's chosen to share.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a glimpse into the soul of an artist who's not afraid to be vulnerable,
Yes.
to confront his demons, and to challenge us to do the same.
All right. So we've laid the groundwork,
We have.
but we're not done yet.
No.
There's still a lot to unpack,
So much more.
especially when we start connecting Scarface's experiences to the bigger picture.
The bigger picture, exactly.
Yeah.
We've only just, scratched the surface of the social commentary, the cultural impact,
Right.
and the musical brilliance that's woven into this performance.
So buckle up and join us for part 2, where we dive even deeper into the heart of Scarface's Tiny Desk concert.
Picking up on that thread of vulnerability, it's interesting how it even comes through in his musical choices.
Oh, you're right. It's not just the, heavy hitters.
Right.
He includes Mary Jane and Smile,
Yes.
which are more introspective.
Uh-huh.
It almost feels deliberate, like he's curating the emotional arc of the whole set.
It does. Yeah, it's not a greatest hits compilation. It's a carefully crafted narrative.
Totally.
And even within the songs, there's this tension between darkness and light.
Yeah, like in I Seen a Man Die.
Right.
It's bleak, but there's also this undercurrent of survival,
Yes.
of finding a way forward despite the trauma.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
musically, it's fascinating how he achieves that.
Yeah.
The song starts with this sparse, almost mournful piano,
Yeah.
then builds into this driving beat that feels relentless,
Right.
mirroring that cyclical nature of the violence he's describing.
That detail about the piano really stood out to me, too.
Yes.
It's not a typical Scarface sound,
Right.
but it adds this layer of melancholy, almost like a lament.
It's brilliant. It subverts expectations.
Yeah.
And, creates a sonic landscape that's both familiar and unexpected.
Totally.
And speaking of subversion, I want to circle back to his collaboration with Mike Dean.
Okay.
He mentions how their creative process can be contentious at times, but there's this underlying respect.
Yeah, he calls Dean one of the coldest he knows.
Exactly.
I'm assuming that's high praise coming from Scarface.
High praise indeed.
And it speaks to a level of trust.
Yes.
That's essential for any successful collaboration.
For sure.
They're not just colleagues,
Right. They're pushing each other
They're pushing each other to create something truly unique.
to create something special.
It reminds me of something he said earlier about how good music needs to touch people emotionally.
Yes.
That's what Dean brings to the table too, right?
Totally. That sonic depth.
That sonic depth.
That adds another dimension to the storytelling.
Absolutely. And think about mind playing tricks on me,
Yes.
the spooky dissonance, the
Yeah.
distorted vocals,
Yeah.
it all contributes to that sense of paranoia and unease.
It's like a sonic representation of what it feels like to be trapped inside your own head,
Yes.
battling those demons.
And it's so different from the typical tiny desk sound.
Right, and that's what makes this performance so compelling.
Yeah.
He's not trying to fit into any preconceived notions of, what a Tiny Desk concert should be. Right. He's bringing his full artistic vision to the space, darkness, and all.
And the band is right there with him.
Oh, yeah.
They're so tight navigating those complex arrangements
Yes.
with such precision.
Amazing musicians.
I was particularly blown away by the drummer.
Oh, yeah.
The way he shifts from these subtle, almost jazzy grooves
Yeah.
to these hard-hitting beats.
It's masterful.
It's a testament to their musicianship.
Absolutely.
They're not just backing him up.
They're an integral part of the storytelling.
Yes, responding to his every nuance
Yeah.
with such sensitivity.
Incredible.
And then there's the audience. They're captivated, hanging on his every word,
Yes.
singing along to even the deepest cuts.
It creates this incredible energy, this feedback loop between performer and listener.
Yeah.
It's like a collective catharsis,
I love that.
a shared experience of vulnerability and release.
You can tell Scarface is feeding off of that energy, too.
Oh, for sure.
He seems genuinely touched by the response. Almost surprised by the level of adoration.
It humanizes him.
Yeah, totally.
We see him not just as this, iconic figure,
Right.
but as a man who's poured his heart into his music.
Yeah.
And is humbled by the way it connects with people.
It's beautiful. It's a powerful reminder of the power of music to transcend barriers,
For sure.
to create community, to heal.
Absolutely.
And it brings us back to that idea of legacy,
Right.
which he touches on when he introduces Bryce.
Yes.
It's not just about his own journey.
right.
It's about passing on the torch, inspiring the next generation to find their voice.
It's almost like a microcosm of the whole hip-hop tradition.
Yeah,
The passing down of knowledge and experience from one generation to the next.
exactly. And it highlights that cyclical nature of creativity.
How inspiration flows through time, shaping and reshaping the art form.
Okay, so we've talked about the music, the collaboration, the impact.
Yeah.
But there's one element we haven't really touched on yet.
Okay.
His voice.
His voice, yes.
It's the instrument that carries all of this weight, all of this emotion.
It's the thread that weaves it all together, right?
Yeah.
That deep, gravelly tone, the way it cracks with emotion at times, the subtle inflections. It's all part of his storytelling.
There's a rawness to it,
Yes.
a lived-in quality that makes you believe every word.
Absolutely.
And yet there's also a tenderness, especially when he sings.
yes.
It's like he's holding nothing back.
It's like he's inviting us into the most private corners of his soul.
Yeah, and that's what makes his music so affecting, so unforgettable.
For sure.
It's not just entertainment, It's a testament to the human spirit's ability to persevere, to find beauty, even in the darkest of places.
Powerful stuff.
It's incredible how he manages to convey so much with just his voice.
Yes.
The way he shifts from aggression to vulnerability,
Right.
from defiance to resignation. It's a masterclass in vocal expression.
It really is. And it's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful instrument is the one we're born with.
So true. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've explored the musical nuances, the collaborative spirit, the emotional depth. But there's one more layer I want to peel back before we wrap up part 2.
Okay, what's that?
It's the way he uses the tiny desk setting itself
Okay.
to enhance the impact of the performance.
Right.
It's like he understands the power of intimacy,
Yes.
the way it draws the listener in. It's almost like he's weaponizing the closeness.
Right.
We're used to seeing Scarface on massive stages.
Yeah.
But here, stripped of all the spectacle, it's just him and us.
Yeah. It changes the whole dynamic.
It changes the whole dynamic. It becomes this shared secret,
Right.
a whispered confession. And it forces us to confront the weight of his words,
Yeah.
his experiences, in a way that a stadium show never could.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to the bigger picture, I think.
Totally.
The social commentary
Yes.
that's woven throughout his work.
We've touched on this throughout the episode.
We have.
But I think it's worth emphasizing just how groundbreaking Scarface was in
Yeah.
terms of addressing social issues in his music.
For sure.
On My Block wasn't just a song about his neighborhood.
Right.
It was a commentary on the realities of poverty,
Yeah.
the lack of opportunity,
Yeah.
the cycle of violence that plagues so many communities.
And he didn't shy away from those hard truths.
Not at all.
I Seen a Man Die is a perfect example.
Yeah.
It's not just a catchy song.
It's more than that.
It's a gut punch that forces us to confront the brutality of the world he's describing.
And it's not just violence.
Right.
Mind Playing Tricks on Me
Yes.
was one of the first mainstream hip-hop songs to explicitly address mental health struggles.
Absolutely.
You think about the context of that era.
Yeah.
Mental illness was so stigmatized,
Oh, yeah.
especially within Black communities.
Right.
He was risking his career by being so open about his own struggles.
It's wild to think about how much has changed
I know.
and how much hasn't
Right.
since he released that song.
Totally.
We're more open about mental health now,
Yeah, we are.
but the systemic issues that contribute to those struggles,
Right.
the lack of access to care, the stigma,
Yeah.
those are still very real problems.
They are, and that's what makes his music so enduring, so relevant.
I think so.
He's not just reflecting his own experiences.
Right.
He's tapping into something universal
Yes.
about the human condition,
Absolutely.
the struggle to survive, to
Yeah.
find hope amidst the darkness.
It's like he's giving voice to the voiceless,
Yes.
to those who've been marginalized, silenced, forgotten.
And he's doing it in a way that's both unflinching
Yes.
and deeply empathetic.
Musically, he's doing something incredibly innovative.
Yeah, talk about that.
He's blending genres,
Uh-huh.
incorporating elements of soul funk, even blues,
Wow.
into his hip-hop sound.
Yeah.
He's creating this rich sonic tapestry that reflects the complexity of his experiences.
I'm thinking about that moment in Smile,
Yes.
where the music just drops out, and it's just his voice.
A cappella.
A cappella, raw and vulnerable.
Chilling.
It's chilling, but it's also incredibly powerful.
It's a masterstroke.
It is.
It strips away all the layers,
Yeah.
all the production,
Yeah.
and leaves us with the naked emotion.
It's powerful stuff.
And it's in those moments of vulnerability that he truly connects with the listener.
It's like he's saying, this is me.
Yeah.
This is my truth. And I'm not afraid to share it with you.
And that takes incredible courage.
It does. So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I keep coming back to this idea of legacy.
Yeah.
What do you think Scarface's legacy will be?
I think it's multifaceted.
Yeah.
He's a pioneer of Southern hip-hop,
Definitely.
a master storyteller,
Uh-huh.
a voice for the marginalized.
Totally.
But beyond all that, he's an artist who's never been afraid to be himself.
Right.
Flaws and all.
Yeah.
And I think that's what resonates most deeply with his fans.
Agreed.
It's that authenticity,
Yeah.
that vulnerability,
There's honesty.
that makes his music so timeless, so impactful.
And that's something we can all learn from, right?
Absolutely.
The power of being true to ourselves, of sharing our stories, of using our voices to speak truth to power.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I think we've done justice to this incredible performance.
I think so.
Thank you for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been a privilege to explore Scarface's artistry and to unpack the layers of meaning embedded in his music.
And to our listener, I encourage you to revisit this Tiny Desk concert with fresh ears.
Yeah.
Let the music wash over you.
Uh-huh.
And reflect on the ways in which Scarface's stories resonate with your own life.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Right.
Keep exploring, keep listening, keep questioning. That's what makes a deep dive truly rewarding.